Let's hit that record button. There we go. Okay, committee members, folks who are joining as panelists, this meeting's being recorded, so you know you'll be recorded, and this will serve as a part of our record for the evening. My name is Allison. I'm going to be your facilitator tonight. I'm joined by my colleague Jen, who is taking notes and developing our meeting summary today. For our committee members, it's lovely to see your faces, and I'm going to let you do a dealer's choice on whether you have your cameras on or off. In our pre-meeting banter, we were talking about some of the unwellness. I mean, COVID continues to happen, and the pressure of living in a global pandemic continues to take its toll on folks, as many of you may be on dealing with a lot of things in your life. So if today is just a day where you cannot be on screen, go ahead and let us know in the chat that you need to be off camera today. The chat is open for our committee members, so you can use that. If you want to let me know that you have something to say, if you want to give some kudos to someone else, if you want to drop a comment or a question in there, I'll be monitoring that throughout our meeting. And also if you are encountering any technical issues, one request I have, if everybody can open up that chat box and change your settings from hosts and panelists to everyone. That'll ensure that the folks who are tuning in to observe our meeting are also able to follow along in your chat comments. And for the folks who are joining us, hey, we're glad that you're here. Welcome. We're going to be getting to our public comment period a little later in our meeting. So we look forward to hearing from you if you would like to give any testimony this evening. Okay, for committee members and anybody joining in as a panelist as well, you can drop your pronouns into your Zoom name. Many of you already have. You can do that by clicking those three buttons over the top of your video screen and select rename. Okay, anything else? As a reminder for folks, we have group agreements. I'm not going to go through them all today, but just as a little reminder for folks, I'll be watching out for those. And if there are any areas where we need to maybe re-ground in our group agreements, I'll be giving you some gentle reminders throughout the meeting. Okay, I think that was it. So with that, Teresa, hi, Tri-Chairs, good evening.
Hi, and hi everyone else, to committee members, elected officials, staff, as well as the public. So a quick review of the agenda. At 5:35 to 6:15, we'll have a discussion with county officials and invited speakers. I do have to say up ahead that Chair Kafori will have to leave a bit earlier because they have a budget hearing meeting at 6. So heads up on that, but we'll still have many other great staff and officials here still. At 6:15, we have a discussion with a few other invited speakers, Tim Scott from County Elections and Christian Oken, the Budget Director. 6:45, we get a break, thank goodness. 6:50, we have subcommittee report outs. 7:05 is when we will have public comment. So anyone who wants to give public comment today or is interested, that will be the time period. And then at 7:20, we close up shop and adjourn. So with that in mind, let's get started on the discussion with county officials and invited speakers. Mark, start us off.
Okay, I successfully have unmuted, and now I'm ready to introduce the 4 folks who either in person or via another medium will be with us tonight. First in line will be Chair Kafori, Deborah Kafori, followed by, I believe, in sequence, Commissioner Vega Peterson. Sounds like maybe a staff person might deliver her message, or it may be someone on our staff. And then DA Mike Schmidt is going to be speaking to us, followed by Auditor Jennifer McGurk, who will be speaking to us again for the, I believe it the 3rd visit for us. So with that, I'd like to have Deborah Kafori speak and join us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Deborah Kafori. I use she, her pronouns. I'm your Multnomah County Chair. And I appreciate your comments, Allison. I know this is a really tough time for everyone. And I so much appreciate that you all are spending so much of your time working on this Charter Review Committee. It's really important. And unfortunately, when you talked about COVID, tonight we have our first public hearing. The Multnomah County Board of Commissioners, as you know, does public hearings every year for the budget, and tonight's our first one, and 2 of our commissioners are out with COVID. So Not only was last night election night, now we have people who unfortunately have COVID. So everyone, I think, is just doing their best. That's what I got to say. Giving everyone so much grace right now, because everyone is just trying to do their best. So I've heard and I understand that you and members of the various subcommittees have been focused on finding ways to improve representation, and if there's ways to create a more equitable, more inclusive democracy. And as someone who served in public in the government for years, I actually ran my first race for the Oregon State House 23 years ago. So I'm getting a little old, but I care deeply for Multnomah County as an institution. And I want to say that no cause could be nobler than the one that you're undertaking right now. So we are living in an era, and I don't have to tell you this, but we're living in an era where our rights to basic participation in government are under threat. And we know that Oregon, as much as we may love this place that we call home, we know that we have a particularly shameful history when it comes to the disenfranchisement and marginalization of people of color. So we can and we must do better, and I applaud your attention to these topics. I know I don't have a lot of time on the agenda tonight. Again, I apologize. I have to leave in about 15 minutes. And I know that you all have spent a lot of time digging into these topics. So I'm going to follow up our conversation tonight with a letter, and then I'm also happy to come back at any time to talk with you. So I'll start with some of the proposals that I understand that you're considering, that I personally am in support of, and have talked with folks at the county, and think that there's ways to get there. The first one is the request of the auditor to have a good government hotline. I support the good government hotline, and the county could support having a hotline enshrined in our charter. But I want to make sure that it is properly scoped to assure that the auditor's office is focused on auditing functions and not management of county or the investigation of personnel rule violations. So, and I've offered to the auditor in the past, and offering again to work with the auditor's office or with you as a charter review committee on how we could finesse that language. And or alternately, the auditor could work with our county attorney and develop a path to recognize the good government hotline in county code if putting something in the charter doesn't work out. So there's two avenues there. The second one is around the ombudsperson. And I support the auditor's proposal to add an ombuds office within the auditor's office. The amendment language that you all have seen, I think that the proposal appears largely consistent with the duties and mission of the auditor's office, but I would recommend a few minor changes to that language to, once again, to ensure that the ombuds office does not conflict with the chair's authority to investigate employee conduct. And I could read this off to you, but I probably it would be better and easier for all of us if I just sent you the language that we're looking at. There's another issue that I know that you talked about originally, and maybe I'll just run through this, and then if we have questions, is that easier than stop? Okay. I know that this was an issue that you your groups talked about at some point. I don't know if it's still risen to the top, but there has been talk in the past about putting the chief operating officer position in the charter. Multnomah County is a large and complex organization, and I know that I have benefited from the assistance of a chief operating officer who serves as the supervisor. The chief operating officer serves as the supervisor of all the department heads and oversees the details of many of the day-to-day county operations. When there was a period during the pandemic of all times when we did not have the COO, our COO had left, and just really highlighted the importance of having this position at Multnomah County. So I believe that the COO plays a valuable role in our organization. And if there was some way to have that enshrined in the charter, I would be in support of that. You all, I understand, have been considering increasing the number of times that the Board of County Commissioners goes to visit the jails. We now go once a year, and I don't know that going too frequently would make much of a difference. I think, you know, if you wanted to have, say that we needed to be there twice a year, there's also the corrections grand jury. That is a group of community members that's assigned every year. And maybe you already know this. I'm sorry if I'm telling you something you already know. But they're assigned every year. The district attorney can talk more about that as his office runs it. And they're a group of community members like yourself who come together and study the corrections. And they do a really in-depth look at the jails as well. And as county commissioners and as the chair, I talk with them and walk with them through their proposals. So there are a lot of eyes on our jail system. I think that having the commissioners go more than a few times a year, I don't know that will get at maybe what you're looking at, but I'm happy to, if there's specific issues that you were trying to address with this topic, maybe that would be helpful for us to discuss. Another issue that I know that you've been looking at is the non-citizen voting. And I just want to say that it's something that we've talked about, the commissioners have been talking about actually recently. And it is a complicated but completely necessary topic. There are many members of our community who are affected by the policies that we enact, and they are unable to vote because of their citizenship status. And these are community members, as you know, who pay taxes, who utilize our public goods and services, and contribute to our economy. So I support, on principle, the right of non-citizens to vote in our elections. In talking with our county attorney's office, I do think that finding the right legal framework to get that outcome could be tricky. And that's why this issue has not risen, has not been enshrined in our charter, in our code. And ideally, I think that this is a topic that would be considered at the state level, and non-citizens in Oregon would be empowered to vote via an amendment to the state's constitution. But I understand that there could be both political and policy reasons to do it at the county level. So your committee could adopt charter language that would say, for example, the Board of County Commissioners must expand the right to vote in Multnomah County elections to the fullest extent permitted by law. And then I would work with my commissioners to establish a defensible ordinance language. So that's a path that you could go in terms of the non-citizen voting. And then I think you all also have been discussing changes to the charter review process, and no better committee to look at changing the charter review process than you all, who are dedicating so much time and energy to this and seeing firsthand the limitations. And I think we've in the past tweaked it, but as you can see, we still maybe haven't gotten it right. And anything that you wanted to do to increase flexibility and allow your group more time to learn about the county's work, I think would be helpful. So I know that the Office of Community Involvement has talked about providing the committee with an additional 6 months of work time, which would be helpful. After being at the county for coming up on 14 years, I know that it is extremely complex, and trying to figure out in such a short time changes to the charter is challenging. I don't envy your task. And it also sounds reasonable to me and sensible that you would empower, that our committee would empower the Office of Community Involvement to appoint the charter review committee members rather than the state senators and representatives as it's currently written. And actually I've talked with a few of our state electeds who aren't even aware that they do appoint, because they're like their staff does it, or they don't feel invested in that process. So I know that our Office of Community Involvement would feel very invested in this process. So that seems like a change that would make sense. So, and I'm sure you have other areas that you've talked about that I would be happy to answer questions and talk to you about that maybe I just haven't heard yet about, or haven't, you're just mulling over some ideas. But before that, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the proposals that caused me some concern. And the first one is the budget floor for the auditor. And I know that our budget director, Christian Elkin, is presenting to you later this evening about talking about how the budget process works at the county. And but I want to take a moment to share my perspective on the auditor's proposal to use the charter to fix her budget at a certain percentage of county expenditures. A fixed 1% would almost triple the auditor's current budget, and codifying it in the charter would do so for perpetuity, as you know. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. I believe that no elected official or even a life-saving program in the health clinics or domestic violence no one else has a protected budget floor. So having an increase should be evaluated through a substantial public-facing project, such as the budget process that we are currently in. I strongly believe that flexibility is critical for commissioners when we're crafting our budget. The budget does not happen in a vacuum. It's subject to unique economic forces in any given year. I mean, just during my time on the board, I've done budgets during the financial crash in the late 2000s. We went through the Great Recession, and then most recently the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have to respond to both volatile revenues and unforeseen, like with the COVID-19 pandemic, urgent community needs. So guaranteeing a percentage of revenue to one office in the county, I think, would greatly hinder the board's ability to be fully responsive to those needs by restricting the funds that are available.
Chair, I just want to do a quick time check because I know you've got to run
Oh,
also.
yes. Sorry. Thank you for looking at the clock because I wasn't. I can stop there and have a few minutes of questions if that's helpful.
Yeah, why don't we, committee members, if we might not get through all your questions tonight, but if you want to put them in the chat, and maybe if you do have a question, you can say for the chair, so we can know when we save it that that's for the chair. And I think Chair Kafoury, you've kindly offered to follow up in writing, and you'll be sending a letter. But does anybody have a burning question that you'd like to share verbally? I'd love to hear from committee members if you do have something before the chair goes off. Yeah, Donovan, go for it.
This is a comment, but so just on the visiting jails part, I'm the co-chair of the Safety and Justice Committee. And the thought behind that is increasing accountability in our jails. And we do know that you all visit once a year. And the thought is that the jails are not humane often. And so having the Board of Commissioners go with at least 4 times will help on a very, very baseline level create some more ticks of accountability. And especially people in our jails are often the most unseen in the county. So we want the people who are governing to see the people who are at the brunt end of some of the worst parts of the county.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that, because I do think that you're right about having eyes on is a different experience than just hearing about people's experiences. And we have been committed as a board to reducing people's experience, diversion programs so that people don't go to jail, but also that, and we've reduced the number of jail beds that are available in our communities because we believe that there are better alternatives, more effective alternatives, more humane alternatives. And also Donovan, just your committee, since this is something that you're interested in, I don't know if you've participated in or heard about the Transforming Justice project that we're working on to continue really turning away from incarceration as a way to deal with our community issues. And it's we've put together a framework of our values, and I think they would align with what your group is looking at.
Yeah, I'm the second vice president of our Portland NAACP, and we got that Transforming Justice RFP, and we're strongly considering applying, but we didn't have capacity ultimately to apply for that. But yeah, I know some of the things the county is doing. And again, the thought is that the people governing should see the people that are still at the brunt end of some of the worst parts of the county. So that's why we want to increase the frequency.
Got it. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that.
Chair, there's at least one question in the chat, and I think a few other members may be writing them down, but also let's maybe not have you going straight from one Zoom meeting to another and give you the grace of a few minutes to prepare for your budget hearing. But thank you so much for joining us today. I think committee members will follow up with the chair with additional comments. We have 2 more invited speakers in this agenda item. So Chair Kafuri, thank you so much. Good luck with your budget hearing.
Thank you. And I have staff on the call, and I know that you all will get the questions to me. So and again, happy to come at another time. Sorry, tonight is our first budget hearing and I have to go, but I really just wanted to be here to tell you how much I appreciate all of you, and happy to talk more about all of these issues. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Next up, am I correct that that Commissioner Vega Peterson's message is going to be delivered at this time?
So unfortunately, not tonight. Commissioner Vega Peterson is going to share a statement in writing that I will share to the committee and post on our website for the public to read. And if there's any response to it, we can discuss that at your next meeting.
Okay, thank you. I believe that District Attorney Mike Schmidt is ready to speak with us. Hello, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We've been looking forward to asking you some questions. I'm sure some of the group will be asking you something. So at your leisure, please start and talk to us. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And I'll echo the chair's sentiments. Thank you for doing this work of looking at our charter and making sure that our county is set up the right way to be successful. It's great that you all are coming together to really do a deep dive. I'll be pretty brief and happy to answer questions. I really wanted to, give you all the opportunity. I saw that you have a public safety subcommittee. You're thinking about some very interesting and exciting things. So I really wanted to make myself available to just, be able to answer questions for you. But, I think one of the things was brought up in the last comments of the chair. I read the auditor's proposed amendments, and I don't have too much insight. I don't have a lot of, thoughts about what the auditor's proposing, but I did think it was interesting, the proposal to have the auditor's budget not tethered or subject to the chair's discretion, but tied to, different factors. Of course, as an independent elected, I would love that myself, but I do see challenges with that type of a model going forward. So I do think that there is a public budget process that we all go through, and I'm up tomorrow at 11 a.m. in front of Christian Elkin and company. So I'm looking forward to my shot at convincing folks that they ought to invest more in the district attorney's office. The real thing that I wanted to mention, I was nudged and encouraged to join you all by a friend, and it was in response to, I was at a meeting in Nashville, Tennessee, and a young man raised his hand and he said, DA Schmidt, I love everything you're doing. You're doing great stuff on reform work. How do young people get involved in your office? And I really had kind of stammered, and I was like, well, we have internships and, I'm sure there are other ways to get involved. And it was suggested to me, that wasn't a very good answer, by the way. I knew it when I was giving that answer, but it was suggested maybe a youth advisory commission would be an excellent thing to to have. And of course, as a DA, I can form my own youth advisory commission, and you know, that may be something that I pursue. But maybe that's also an idea that you, as the charter commission, because obviously I'm the DA right now, and hopefully I will continue to be the DA when I run again. But you never know, right? And I think it really did bring to me how important it is to structurally build youth voices into our systems. And so I just thought it was a really great idea. And I don't, you know, I would support something like that. And if it's right for the charter review process, I would support that. If it's something I do on my own, then I'll pursue it that way. But I thought it was a really great idea, and it would be a good opportunity for me to get to speak to you all tonight. So that's all I had. So I'm gonna open it up for questions. You guys are talking about some interesting things with jails and other things. So maybe you have some questions for me that I can be helpful for.
There's a question from Jay in the chat. Does the district attorney already work with an advisory committee?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So for the first time ever, we actually have formed a community advisory. So I should say, we have a community budget advisory committee, the CBAC, which helps through the budget process. And that's been ongoing for well before me. We did just form, for the first time ever, an advisory committee, you know, formed of community members to help us on policy things that our office encounters. So for example, they have a meeting coming up, and they're going to be talking about how our office handles people who may be facing immigration consequences as a result of convictions in the criminal legal system. So that's an example of the type of policies that people who are volunteering their time once a month to meet with us do. So it is, you know, it's a good group of people, broad range of stakeholders. So we do have some, but it's not focused on youth. It's more broad experience of community members, stakeholders.
Other questions from committee members? Yeah, Salma, go ahead.
Hi.
Ooh, Salma, I think your internet is spotty.
Safety and safety and justice committee, and we've been delivering. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think we can hear you now. It sounds like you're doing like that robot voice thing when the internet's bad.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now. Much better.
Perfect. Well, hello. I really appreciate you being here. And I was just wondering, I'm on the Safety and Justice Subcommittee, and we've been delivering a lot about the public defense, the public defender's office. And I know that you've already commented on this previously, and I'm just wondering maybe any advice that you have, or consider maybe things that we can consider in this process, because we've been facing a lot of walls in how we would have been approaching this issue and trying to maybe change it, maybe have a public, like elected public defender's office instead, and other possibilities to better solve our current issues that have been on the constant rise. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Salma. It truly is structurally the biggest challenge that we face right now in our community, and quite frankly in our state. In Multnomah County, there are currently over a dozen, I believe, people who are being held in jail awaiting trial. They've been accused of crimes, not convicted. They're awaiting trial and not been assigned a public defender. It is everybody's constitutional right to be given a public defender if you can't afford one. We've all seen Law and Order on TV, right? You have the right to remain silent. What said will you be used against you? You have a right to an attorney. Well, the state is not coming through with the right to the attorney. The tricky thing about this issue for the county is that the way public defense is funded is it's funded through the state. And they fund it through a commission that essentially contracts with entities to handle the workload in each of the counties across the state. So it's structurally, it has a lot of challenges. There are work groups happening at the state level to really reconsider the way that we are structured. I'm not an expert in this area. It makes sense to me to have an office of public defense in the county, and even having that person elected to be an elected leader of that office. That all makes a lot of sense to me. I think when I look at pay parity, major issue. Deputy district attorneys who start with me fresh out of law school make a lot more money than public defenders who have been doing it for years. That's not right. I mean, we're part of the same system. They deserve to have better pay. But again, we have this system where the state's paying for some things, the county's paying for some things. So those things, that's why there's not coordination or alignment. So I think there's some real structural issues that need to be sorted out at the state level. And obviously, if the county was to step into this void right now, that's that's money that is supposed to be coming from the state. And if the county steps in to take that over, that's less budget for other county services. So really the state needs to step up and provide the resources that we need. They need to fulfill their obligations to this community to provide indigent folks with public defenders. So it's a complicated issue, but it really is, we've had many cases dismissed because of lack of public defenders. We've had all the way up to felony strangulation, domestic violence case. I mean, that's scary for a victim. And so we had to really hustle to get protective orders in place and other things like that. So it's bad for everybody. It's bad for public safety. It's bad for victims. It's bad for defendants. They have a right to counsel and they deserve that. So it needs to be sorted out. I'm happy to talk at much greater length and answer any questions if you all want a deeper dive from my perspective. And I would recommend talking to Carl McPherson, who heads up Metropolitan Public Defender, and Jessica Campy, who heads up MDI. And I can tell you where we're at on the statewide conversations.
Thank you so much.
Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. Does Multnomah County, in its status as a home rule county, have an advantage in attempting to make some changes to this system?
That's a good question, Mark. I don't know the answer to your question. It's too good of a question. It may. If we tried to break it apart at the state level and say, hey, give us this block money and we'll manage it ourselves instead of going through the state system. I don't know the answer to your question. It's a good one, though.
I did see Catherine come on screen during that one. Maybe Catherine, you could follow up with Mark, or maybe share in the chat some of your insights there.
Yeah, Mark, I'm happy to chat with you about it and also chat with the subcommittee about it. But I mean, I think DA Schmidt has hit the nail on the head in the sense that this is a state obligation to provide those public defense services. And so that's really the starting point for curing a lot of the issues here. And so there's maybe issues besides authority issues that come up around this proposal that are bigger issues than authority issues. There might be some authority issues there, but I think, as he's identified, it's really a state obligation to provide these services, and the county stepping into that would just could have a lot of different implications.
Thank you.
Selma, I see your hand is still up. Was that up from earlier? Did you have another question? Oh, cool. Thanks, Selma. Any other questions from committee members?
We really appreciate your time and answering all the questions that you've helped us with, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you all for the work you're doing. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, County Auditor Jennifer McGurk, who is visiting us, I believe, third time. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's very important to us.
Thank you so much. I think this is my first time with the full committee, actually, but my third time with those who are also on the Government Accountability Subcommittee, and my second time with those who are on the Safety and Justice Subcommittee. So I really appreciate your interest in my office and the role that we provide to the county. I use she, her pronouns. And I just want to echo what the other speakers have said. Your service is so important. Really digging into the county charter, bringing proposed amendments to voters. It's so important to having a county where people's voices matter and people can have a say in how their government functions and in what it values. So I just want to acknowledge you all. Thank you. No surprise, I'm going to ask you to support bringing the proposed amendments from my office to the charter to voters. These measures are intended to help ensure that years from now, the auditor's office will still be able to carry out its accountability function, even if we were to have a county administration that didn't support the role. The proposed amendments will provide safeguards to help ensure an independent auditor's office that the public can rely on. Right now, for example, there are no safeguards to ensure that the auditor's office can access information. And I've talked about some of the issues we've had accessing information when I've met with the Government Accountability Subcommittee. Also right now, the position that oversees nearly everything my office can audit is also the position that has budget power over my office. In my written testimony to the Government Accountability Subcommittee, I talked about how it is very hard for an individual office like mine to get things into the budget once the chair's proposed budget is public. It's just kind of a non-starter. There are so many other critical operations the county does, and it's not something that my office can typically compete with. I also want to just point out that while there's not a budget floor for other offices, there is no other office at the county that regularly publicly criticizes work that is carried out directly under the chair of the county. That presents a huge conflict of interest. And it's actually identified in generally accepted government auditing standards as an undue influence threat, where there's the potential for resources and funding to be withheld from the auditor. The model legislation that my professional association, the Association of Local Government Auditors, has put forth talks about ways to reduce that threat. For example, the audit activity must have funding appropriate to its specific responsibilities. I would argue in this case where our responsibilities are to audit all county financial affairs and operations that we might be understaffed. And we're also supposed to be free from decisions about the auditing organization's budget by management. So management should not be controlling the budget decisions for the audit function. Some jurisdictions establish a minimum threshold for the audit budget to provide this independence. And when I met with the Government Accountability Subcommittee, I provided a few examples of jurisdictions that have put into their charter protections around the auditors or the Inspector General's budget. For example, New Orleans provides 0.75% of their general fund budget to their Office of Inspector General every year. The city of San Francisco has a budget allocation as well. The entire nation of Canada has a budget allocation for all of their local government auditors. So what my office is proposing, while it might not be something that Multnomah County has done before, it's not unusual by any means, and it's been proven to be workable. I also presented to the Government Accountability Subcommittee some options. If 1% is feeling uncomfortable, while I take issue with the examples that were presented as to what would happen if my office got a 1% allocation, I understand that that's a big leap for people. We'd be happy with 0.5%, 0.75%. What we need is something that removes us from that threat that we're facing and that provides something that's sustainable. So when the county adds on new operations like a joint office for homeless services, preschool for all, makes other big increases in its scope of services, that you actually have an accountability function that can scale up and provide oversight to those things. I just also want to say I appreciated that the chair said she could support putting the hotline and the ombudsman in charter. I am really not unsure about what her concerns are with respect to putting those things into charter the way they're presented. The charter language that we're proposing, which I'm open to modifying at the direction of the county attorney's office if needed, is based on state law. The ombudsman language is based on the city of Portland's charter. We do not do personnel investigations. That is not our intention with the hotline, never has been. And that's not something that an ombudsman does either. So I just really hope that you give the public an opportunity to decide what they want their auditor's office to do and to help ensure its independence into the future. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Committee members, any questions? Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too much in the weeds until we have had a chance to get the full committee completely, just all caught up on your proposed amendments, because it may be a little sort of obscure right now before we haven't even reported out of the committees yet, but sort of in anticipation of the conversation that may happen, I wanted to see if you have an answer. So Annie put a question in the chat that the chair didn't have time to answer. So since you're here, I'm wondering if you'd be able to give us your answer, and then perhaps we can get the chair's answer either from staff. So I'll read it. Or Annie, do you want to read it? It's your question.
Oh, either way, I just ask that, if we don't decide to recommend enshrining the auditor's budget in the charter itself, is there another recommendation that the chair would make as to a way to ensure that auditor independence? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
It would be inappropriate for the chair to be the one making a proposal about how to ensure my office's independence from the chair, is my first response. In some jurisdictions where they have a fully separate commission from management, where the commission is fully legislative, auditors do bring their budgets directly to that body. We don't have that here. The chair is both the county CEO and a commissioner. So there's no separation of the executive from the legislative. And so that's why this is the remedy. It does not mean that I would not be presenting my budget each year before the county. It just means that no matter who the chair is, they can't decide that we don't need to appropriately staff or fund the audit function. And I just want to be really clear, this isn't about who's in office right now. This is about a flaw in the system that needs correction. And it's something that a number of jurisdictions have corrected and have done in a way that makes a lot more sense if you really want to have an independent auditor.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
I'm interested to know, Auditor McGurk, have you ever proposed a review of this type about the role of the chair being also CEO versus a member of the Board of Commissioners, with more parity among the commissioners?
I have not proposed a change to the county structure, no. I don't think that that's my role. I feel like that would be the role of your body if that's something you wanted to explore. I know the chair talked earlier about the value of a COO. My master's degree is in public administration, and one of the things that we studied in depth there was that you typically don't have a COO, a county administrator, who reports just to the chair. They would report to the whole commission. So I feel like if you're going to dig into that, maybe then that's the conversation to have around the changing the budgeting structure for the auditor. But I don't feel like I feel like I've taken on enough trying to get proposals in around my office.
Thank you for your comments.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands, but committee members, remember, you can always put a comment in the chat or question, even if it occurs to you later on in our meeting. Just let us know if it's for someone so that we can know when we grab that chat at the end of the meeting and send those questions to the right folks. But I think with that, thank you so much, Auditor McGuirk.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the work you all are doing. I know you're doing this in addition to family and work and other community. So I really appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think with that, we are just about on time, and we're going to transition to our next item. And Chair Teresa, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, so I know it's definitely a whirlwind talking to all of the elected officials within a short amount of time. So always if you have questions, ask them. But next we get to have two great speakers. First, we'll have Tim Scott from County Elections presenting. So Tim Scott, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tim Scott. I'm the Director of Elections for Multnomah County. I wanted to echo the sentiments of the auditor that I really appreciate the commitment that you all have made to examining the county charter and the ideas that you've been discussing. I've had the ability to listen in on one of the subcommittees a little bit, and so I'm a bit familiar with some of their ideas. I also want to start out by apologizing. I had a 22-hour workday yesterday and followed by 3.5 hours of sleep. And then I'm on, like hour 15 of the next workday. So I think this would probably work best if you could, Kali provided some questions, which I would be happy to sort of go through those questions if that's the way you would like to proceed. I'm seeing some nodding heads, but also feel free to interrupt, and I will try to be as concise as possible, and feel free to cut me off because I like talking about elections and things related to elections. So the first question or the subject that Kali passed on to me was that you were interested in bringing the idea of non-citizen voting forward to the full committee for consideration. And specifically, the question of the steps that our office would have to take to make that a reality, and any major logistical hurdles that you might encounter. One of the obvious things that I thought of after reading this is the voter registration process. Oregon currently has a voter registration process that, in order to implement vote by mail, we need to know who to mail the ballots to. That's sort of the simplest and most idealistic way to think about voter registration, is we have to have a list of people who are going to participate. I also am very aware of how voter registration has been used historically to disenfranchise people. And I'm very aware of sort of the power that that holds in terms of determining who can and can't vote. But the reality is that there's a registration deadline that's listed in the state constitution that, our office sees as somewhat of a barrier to participation. People must be registered to vote prior to a certain deadline in order to be able to participate. Along with that, the registration process in itself is controlled by the Secretary of State's office. Statutorily, we would need to get approval for any sort of registration process or registration form that we would be required to put in place in order to determine who would be participating in the election so that we would know who to send ballots to. Another logistical hurdle would be how to track those registrations. Currently, the state provides the voter registration system, the Oregon centralized voter registration system, which will soon be replaced by a new system called Oregon Votes in 2023. I bring that up mainly to say that's the medium for which we registered voters. Excuse me. Done a lot of talking in the last 48 hours. So there's a hurdle with the state voter registration system in that it doesn't anticipate registering people, or the credentials that are required to register people are set by the state, and changes would probably be required if we anticipated using that system. If we didn't anticipate using that system, we would have to come up with some other sort of database to log or register people to vote who are going to participate that were not a part of the standard voter registration process. And then I think I've covered all the talking points on that. I mean, it's really just sort of about determining who the pool of people is that wants to participate, and then figuring out a way to get them a ballot at the simplest level, you know, coming up with a list of people and then mailing to that list of people, which is something we have a lot of experience with. But it all starts with the voter registration process, which, you know, I'm sure you're aware, voter registration in Oregon got a real boost in 2016 when the legislature enacted Oregon Motor Voter, and registration became automated through DMV to some extent. So largely one of those hurdles was removed by automating it. So something similar could be considered, you know, through some automated process through an agency that people are already interacting with. The other question that I was made aware of is sort of the timeline to consider implementation of something like this. You know, and the other than the things that I've already talked about, sort of working around the logistical items that are in place for the purpose of registering people to vote, you know, our office would have to go through some, you know, change management processes to try to figure out how we would work a new system into place. But also there is likely to be a legal challenge to this concept, and you know, legal challenges can be time consuming. As an example, not trying to make an apples to apples comparison to these two subjects, but the 2016 Charter Review Committee decided to put forward to voters some campaign finance reforms that ultimately voters passed in 2016. Our office was not able to implement those due to legal challenges for several years. It took the courts quite a while to sort of take that process all the way through and determine whether or not our contribution limits were legal, whether or not our disclosure requirements were legal, things like that. So I just want to sort of highlight that as a potential timeline issue that, it would be difficult to control. And that's something that people who file initiative petitions frequently run into. There's a specific timeline on getting those onto the ballot. And if the ballot title is challenged, sometimes those challenges can draw out long enough that they're unable to put the initiative on the ballot in a timely fashion. So that's what I had around the idea of increasing the franchise through non-citizen voting. So are there any questions about that before we move on to another topic? Okay. So the other topic that I was made aware of was about changing the specific voting method that we use. And the first question was, can you tell the committee what an election audit is? And this is sort of related to ranked choice voting, or I understood that the subcommittee looked at star voting as well. Can you tell the committee what an election audit is, and at a high level how elections are currently audited and how they might be audited differently if the county adopts a new voting method? As of, I think it was the 2019 legislative session, we're now required to do an audit, either a risk limiting audit or a random sampling audit of the election results of every election. And we have gone back and forth between doing risk limiting audits and doing the random sampling audits, primarily because we don't have a good software product for doing the random sampling audit, which requires some really complicated math that would be extremely difficult to do without having a software product to help us do those. And that math, does statistical sampling of all of the ballot images and randomly selects those ballot images in a way that can prove to someone performing the audit that the results were counted correctly. And can also, risk limiting audits also sort of boast the fact that they can correct the results, because if you're following the methodology that would say that if you run into errors, that you continue auditing until your sample is small enough that, or large enough that you've overcome those errors by making changes to the way those ballots were counted. So that's another piece of that. The random sampling audit is much simpler in that the Secretary of State's office chooses a random sample of ballot batches from the total number of ballot batches that we counted in a specific election, which could be anywhere from 1 to 4,000, depending on the size of batches and the turnout of the election. And then they randomly sample those ballot batches to a certain percent based on the number of votes between the two leading candidates in the highest vote getting contest. So oftentimes in a presidential election, that would be president. Most people vote on president, but there was one election where a measure got more votes than any other political office on the ballot, and that's when marijuana was on the ballot. So that was our highest vote getting measure, and we ended up auditing that one. But they're randomly sampling the ballot batches, as well as choosing at random the highest vote getting, first the highest vote getting office or measure, and then randomly selecting a statewide measure and a statewide office. And then so for 3 contests, we're randomly sampling a certain number of batches. And that's a hand audit. All all audits in Oregon are by hand, meaning we actually have to go get the ballots, count them by hand, and apply whatever algorithm for determining whether or not those ballots were counted accurately. We've been doing that for a long time. We're very good at it, but we've been doing it under one specific methodology. I have no experience with auditing ranked choice or star contests, so I don't really have any way to provide any sort of expertise on that. It would be something we would have to learn or figure out how to do by scratch. And I'm not sure that the state statutes really contemplate that. However, one county in Oregon is doing ranked choice voting, so I'm sure they had to figure it out. So I would be talking to Benton County if I had to figure it out. The next question, and please let me know, I know Christian's here. I see you, Christian. Good to see you. And I want to make sure she has plenty of time. So can somebody give me a time check? Just about, do I have 5 more minutes?
Take another 4 minutes or so.
4 minutes, great. And then the next question is, can you tell the committee about the election vendor the county works with and any information you share about the process and potential cost to certify a new voting method with that vendor? That's more than a 4-minute answer. However, I will tell you there's lots of steps to that process. Oregon follows what are called the voluntary voting system guidelines, which were created by the Election Assistance Commission, that would require that any tabulation system used in elections would be required to be tested to the whole set of VVSG guidelines or a subset of the VVSG guidelines. And the Oregon has chosen to do a subset of those because the whole test requires sort of polling place equipment, which we don't really use. So we've made the decision as a state to not require the full test, although a lot of vendors go to the independent testing authority certified by the federal government, and they get the whole set of testing done because they want to sell equipment not only in Oregon, but in Pennsylvania or Colorado or wherever else. If they have a full certification, we can accept that as well. Otherwise, if they have no certification and they come to Oregon and say they want to sell equipment that does a certain thing, it has to go be tested at the federal testing authority to the Oregon specific set of the VVSG requirements. All of that is to say we can't buy equipment that isn't certified. So anything that would be a change to the equipment or the software programming that we use would need to be certified to Oregon standards or to the federal EAC standards. Does that make sense? So it's a bit of a process. It's not that it's impossible, it just takes time. If our vendor, which is Clear Ballot, is preparing a system upgrade to do ranked choice voting or star voting for another state, and they've already gone through the testing, the chances that our testing would go much more smoothly are pretty high. Oregon or Colorado, or Clear Ballot, sorry, has some customers in Colorado that are using ranked choice voting, and Clear Ballot is in the process of preparing an update for ranked choice voting. They do not currently support STAR, and so that would be kind of starting from scratch proposition of R&D and then certification. Does that make sense? Okay, one last question and I'll go quickly. Issues or concerns, do you see the county voting method does not align with that used by overlapping jurisdictions, for example, Portland and Gresham? That's a great question. I think sort of based on what we just talked about, there are some logistical considerations if, say, the city of Portland voters choose to accept the proposal that the city of Portland is likely to put forward in November, which is ranked choice voting, and the county chooses to do STAR. Right there, that would be two separate, well, it would actually be three voting methodologies because we'd have first past the post, we'd have ranked choice voting, and then there would be STAR. STAR, as I just mentioned, is not supported by our vendor. We would have to either look for another vendor that supports it, which would be cost and time, and then also get it certified. So there would be some efficiencies in aligning with what our vendor could do, as well as with what other jurisdictions are potentially likely to pass. I know that doesn't make your decision any easier because we don't know what will pass in November, but there would definitely be efficiencies if there was some alignment in the way that elections were conducted. There's significant costs to printing ballots. Our ballots are already long. Ranked choice voting and STAR would both require additional space on the ballot, likely pushing us to a 2-page ballot, which could add additional expense to every election. So if another jurisdiction's already requiring that, there's some efficiency in aligning. So, and I will stop there because I feel like I'm about to get the high sign. So I will answer questions as you have them or whenever you're ready.
Annie, I see your hand. Let's take a question from Annie, and then I want to invite Christian up. We can also, folks, if you have questions, put them in the chat, and same deal. You can say for Tim or for the elections office. But Annie, go ahead.
And just a quick clarifying question. And I know you've had a long couple of days, so I don't know if I'm confused or if it's just your long day, but you said that random sampling audits, you don't have good software for that, but did you mean risk limiting audits? You don't have good software?
Risk limiting audits, yeah. We don't have an Oregon supported specific risk limiting audit software. We have been using Colorado's software, which is open source, and we're welcome to use it. However, we end up being Adams County or City and County of Denver instead of Multnomah County, so it's a little weird to do publicly.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
You had a long day, hopefully a good rest coming up, but appreciate it. And we'll be sure to pass along any questions that come through the chat after this. And with that, Christian, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Good evening now. Christian Elkin, I'm the budget director, the county's budget director. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk about my favorite topic, which is budget. And hopefully after this presentation, it'll be your favorite topic as well. I'm just going to run through some things that I didn't really get a ton of specific questions. So some things that I think maybe will help you as you're going down your journey of really reviewing charter and thinking about potentially what that might mean and where some impacts might be, and future questions that you might want to ask as follow-up as you're making those really important and challenging decisions. This next slide basically shows you kind of a visual of what the county's budget process looks like. And so I'm just going to hit the highlights. It's a budget process that lasts 9 months, and really budgeting lasts all year because we like to think we're the most important people in the room, so we just keep it going. So in November, we start the process typically with a general fund forecast, and we'll talk about why the general fund is so important in a moment. But basically, we have an economist on staff who talks to all the other economists around the state, sometimes around the country, and tries to figure out what are our revenue picture going to look like going into the next fiscal year. So really what it does is it tells us how much money do we think we have to spend. And with that, we decide if we have to cut budgets, which is not a lot of fun, but has been most of my career at the county, and I've been at the county for 20 years. Or do we get to stabilize our budgets, or do we get to add to those budgets? And so that's what that first set of numbers does in November. Then we put some instructions out. So if we have to cut budgets, we say, hey, everybody, for this first round of draft of budgets, we're going to need you to think about cutting 1% of your budget. What are the impacts? What does that look like? And let's start having those conversations. So from December to February, departments and elected officials, including both the DA, the sheriff, and the auditor, are putting together kind of that first draft of the budget within whatever those parameters are for that fiscal year. They deliver those budgets to the chair and the budget office in February. It's a beautiful little Valentine's gift that we get because I'm that nerdy. It is like my most favorite Valentine that I get every single year. And then we start to review that budget submission. And because the county has 10 departments, we run a plethora of services ranging from libraries to homeless shelters, to rent assistance in the community and sun schools, health clinics. We have to take all of those proposals and we have to weigh them. And the chair has to make some really tough decisions to determine what is our community need and how far can our dollar go to buy those services that the community needs. So that is the work that's happening kind of in that blue box there in March and April. This is always also the same process, kind of that executive process that the state uses with the governor and that the city uses with the mayor. So both the governor, the mayor, and the chair kind of have that first opportunity to create the first draft of the budget. You also see this at the federal level where the president creates the first draft of the budget and then Congress gets to come and weigh in on that. So once that budget is released by the chair, according to Oregon budget law, we have to have that document. Then we can start the public deliberation of that budget. Did the chair get it right? Is that actually what the community wants? They want to see different trade-offs weighed. And so that work begins in April and May, which we are in right now, where the board starts having as the legislative body, where the chair becomes one vote of 5 votes. So all the votes are equal at that point. And they start weighing those trade-offs again. Do we need to do something differently? Do we need to amend this? Did we find more revenue? Maybe we can buy more things. Are we losing more revenue? Do we have to cut more things? How do we prioritize that? So that work happens from April to May. We also have public work sessions. And then we have budget work sessions, which the chair unfortunately had to get off tonight to go and attend so that we can hear from the community. The community is reaching out during this time, and we're really trying to weigh all of that information along with our community budget advisory committees who come and provide some feedback as well because they've spent time with the departments over the year. Then finally, mid-June, we have to adopt that budget. So we amend, we make all the changes, we have all the hard conversations, and then the board, I call it the magic of 3 because we have a 5-member board. So anything that ends up in the budget needs a vote of 3 people, and the budget has to be balanced. We are not the federal government. We are not allowed to run deficits. Whatever money we think we have, that's what we have to balance our expenditures to. So if we can go to the next slide, that was a lot in one slide, and I apologize because I'm trying to get you all just tons of information. It wouldn't be a budget presentation if I didn't give you some numbers. So currently we are in the chair's proposed budget stage, or what we like to call the executive budget. That current budget that we just released 2 weeks ago is $3.3 billion. Of that, we've increased the total budget by $467 million, and we'll talk about some of the things that have driven those increases. It supports just under 5,700 FTE. There's $117 million of one-time only money in the general fund, and we'll talk about why that's important to distinguish why one-time only money. And then we fully funded our reserves and contingencies, and I want to talk to you a little bit about why that's good practice, best practice, and really reduces our financial risk in the future. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I told you the budget's $3.3 million, and now I'm telling you all the money that comes into the budget is only $2.81 billion. That's because budgeting requires a lot of accounting, and there's a lot of double counts or things where you have to pick them up from one fund and transfer them to another, or do a cash transfer. So when we think about the true amount of money we have to spend, it's about $2.81 billion. Of that, beginning working capital right now is our largest percentage of that budget. And we'll talk about that in a moment. That when I say beginning working capital, think one-time only dollars. primary driving this is that we passed the library bond last year, and that was roughly around $430 million to build libraries. That's going to occur over 5 years because it's a capital fund. And so we're going to draw those funds down as we build those libraries out. So you'll see that start to shrink. So almost, close to half of that beginning working capital is the library bond that we passed. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this just gives you another view of the budget by department and talks about how each department and their makeup of what we want to call ARP funds, which was the American Rescue Plan that the federal government passed, then other funds, and then general fund. And this is going to be important in a moment because you're going to see why we focus so much on the general fund. But you can see in this instance, our county assets looks like our largest department. That's because that's the department that's building the library bond. So they have $430 million of capital dollars in their total budget. If we can go to the next slide, please. So how can we spend all that money? And I think it's really important here that we make a really strong distinction between what we call the general fund and then all the other dedicated funds. The general fund is money that we collect by property taxes, business income taxes, and a few small other like motor vehicle rental taxes. That money that comes into the county, we can essentially spend, and when I say we, I mean ultimately the Board of County Commissioners makes a decision to spend those funds on anything that's allowed by county charter. So they can spend it on the sheriff, the DA's office, the Joint Office of Homeless Services, County Human Services, the health department, all of those things. The other funds, which you see are 76% of our total budget, which is really the lion's share, are what we could want to call dedicated funds. And those come to the county with specific uses. So the board can't pick up that $2.5 billion and just say, you know what, today I want to spend this $2.5 billion on, funding more preschools or funding more health clinics. That money comes to us in partnership with dedicated expenditures and programs that there's expected outcomes for. So really what we're talking about is the general fund, which you see there up in the right blue corner, 24% of our budget, which is the money that the board has discretion over to determine how they want to make those investments to serve our community. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So here's an example of some of those dedicated or voter initiative funds that we've actually seen a pretty significant increase in the county budget over the last 2 years. So a year and a half ago, we passed, the community passed the Preschool for All initiative, which is bringing preschool to free preschool for 3-year-olds and above. This will be the first year of operationalizing that. We hope to see north of 670 preschoolers being able to take advantage of this program. So that's pretty exciting. The Tri-County metro area passed the supportive housing measure. So you see there's $107 million in our budget that are all dictated by that supportive housing measure and the restraints and constraints that are put on that and how that funding can be spent. This year, because we spent some of the money for the library bond last year, we have $416 million to build and capitalize those new libraries. And then we have $153.6 million of COVID response, also known as American Rescue Plan funding in our budget. That is all dedicated funds. We can go to the next slide, please. So thinking back to that general fund and that $791 million, where are we currently planning to spend that funding? And this is just a quick breakout by department to give you some sense of how those funds, typically what you see is here you see that a lot of our public safety departments are funded with general fund. And that's because we don't receive a lot of other funding to do those services. So for instance, the sheriff's office doesn't really get grants from the federal government, or there's not a huge investment in public, in public health or those areas like you would see traditionally in public safety. And so we have to prioritize those services and ensure that we're meeting the community's needs through those services. And so that's where you see a lot of the public safety. Our community justice department really serves kind of both those roles, where they're doing both kind of more traditional public safety work, but also more of that human services work where you see investments in behavioral health and kind of traditional treatment and residential treatment and alcohol and drug treatment and those types of things. And then you kind of see that we flow down from there where we get to the more traditional kind of government offices where you see community services, which was doing elections where Tim just came from, or county assets, where that's really our facilities and our internal IT programs. So if we can go to the next slide, please.
And Christian, just a time check, maybe another 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to skip this slide. This is just another representation over time of that conversation we just talked about how we spent our general fund. And then we're also going to share these slides out so you all can have access to them as well. And we have some resource links in the back. So some of the things we talked about are we use financial policies and best practices. So within our budget, we have contingencies and earmarks. Think of these as savings accounts in case our expenditures, we have emergency expenditures. During the wildfires a couple years ago, I will get to that question in just a second. During the wildfires, we had to expend some emergency funds. So we went to our contingency account to be able, because we don't have any funds dedicated for wildfires. And until we knew if we were going to get reimbursed by the federal government, we need to ensure that we could respond to our community in the Gorge Fire. Non-departmental is what I call the collection of unicorns. So these are all the kind of things that aren't in a traditional department. This is the county chair's budget, the commissioner's budget, the auditor's budget, policy offices like our equity and diversity office, our sustainability office. So there's kind of this whole collection. It also includes large scale county debt payments that we have to make and those types of things. So it is a lovely set of unicorns with all diverse purposes, but mostly serve a countywide function. We also take some of our money and we put it into a savings account called our reserves in case our revenues start to decline. What we saw during the pandemic was within 3 weeks, the county saw us going from having a $20 million, $30 million kind of money to spend in March of 2020. And within 3 to 4 weeks of the pandemic hitting, we were facing a $60 million deficit. That's a $90 million swing in 3 weeks. We had never experienced anything like that. And because we and the board and the county commissioners have this policy of setting aside 10% of our corporate revenues, we were able in the short term to stabilize our services, because what we also saw was the community was coming to us as the public health authority and saying, we need help. People are losing their jobs. We need rent assistance. We need all these things. And the county did not have to cut our safety net services because we were able to draw off of our reserves. And then finally, I just want to go through this concept of ongoing versus one-time only money. Every year, budgets are a plan. Sometimes those budgets are dead on, and other times there's lots of factors that make it so that the budget and the spending don't align exactly, which means we have a little bit of underspending that we can carry over to the next fiscal year that we call one-time only money. We do not use one-time only money to fund ongoing programs, because that's like taking maybe a bonus you see at the end of the year and going out and buying a house and a long-term mortgage payment. That's not going to be something that's going to be sustainable if you don't get that bonus every single year. You could buy down your debt with that bonus, but you don't want to invest it in a long-term expenditure. And so this is a really important distinction that we use as we're moving through the budget process. We can go to the next slide, please. This is just some resources for y'all. I know that you'd like to do nothing more tonight than start clicking on these links and reading some of them, but I wanted to make sure that you had access to our budget website, our financial policies, our general fund forecast, which talks about how much money we have. And then the final slide just has my contact information so that if you all need to send me, and some work sessions in case you wanted to attend one of them or one of the public hearings. So with that, I will stop talking about all things budget and be happy to answer any questions that might be raised from this.
Thanks, folks. Christian, I don't think that it was answered, the question on ARPA funding and whether that's a one-time deal. That was from Anna in the chat earlier.
That is a very astute question. So ARPA funding is, it's actually, we're treating it like a 2-year allocation. And it really, we have guiding principles, we have, you know, equity principles, leading with race, inclusivity, and we're really trying to manage that balance between working with the emergency and meeting the emergent needs of our community, the public health needs, making all of those investments, and balancing against investing too much in infrastructure and ongoing costs, like I just talked about, where when 2024 comes and that funding expires and it's not available to us anymore, we don't hit this fiscal cliff. So we did not, many communities use that money to backstop revenue losses. Like I was talking about those revenue losses that we were facing in 2020. A lot of communities use that money to just offset their own revenues. At the county, we did not do that because we did not see that as being financially stable going forward. And we understood that our community needed rent assistance. We're putting $40–50 million every year in rent assistance. We're making sure that we can do vaccine clinics. We can reach out to underserved communities. And so we really have been very, I would say, careful and quick to respond to the pandemic needs with those ARP funds.
Folks, we are a little over time and I want to give folks a break. So try chairs if it's cool with you. Maybe we'll close this agenda item. Yep. Okay. I'm seeing some nodding heads. Thank you so much, Christian, for coming by and talking to us. If committee members do have additional questions around budgets or you're clicking through those links, thank you, Kali, for putting that slide deck into the chat. Again, chat's open for you to just let us know who the question should be sent to. And Christian, thank you so much for coming and joining us. Bye. Okay, committee members, we're going to come back and get your committee member report outs, and then we're going to have public comment. I know that there is at least one person out in our audience tonight who is here for public comment. So what we'll probably do is shorten the time that we have on the agenda for public comment, since we only had one person sign up, but we'll also hold space if anybody else here would like to give comment. And we'll come back in 5 minutes for your report out. So 7:06, it's a short one, but go have fun. Turn your cameras off, mute yourself. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Also goes for the folks who are out in the audience. You get a break too. Go get a snack or something. Okay, see you at 7:06. All right. 7:06. If you're not back at your computer or your tablet or your phone or however you're joining tonight, come on in. Also, if you're gonna remain off camera, just let us know that you're back. Committee members, you can drop it into the chat. Thanks, Jude. Appreciate that. And cool. All right. Welcome, Teresa. Over to you.
Awesome. So as we know, we got the report out. So let's start with the Government Accountability Committee.
So I think I'm gonna kick it off, and then Jude and I will kind of split it between the two of us. So we have started to work through going through our topics, and we have made 2 recommendations on that were referenced briefly by the chair. I tried to put them in the chat, and kind of feel like we did this sort of the wrong way around, where we should have kind of, you know, maybe gotten some information out from the committee so that it would have been clear, but we'll learn for other times. But we have made 2 recommendations. One is to extend. We voted on these, but we're not bringing them to you until next meeting, I think. And we have recommended to extend the process by 6 months, which means starting in having the first meeting in March rather than September. If it's all a bit blurry now, but if you recall, we started in the fall. This would just give the committee a little more time to dig into issues. We have also made a recommendation to remove state representatives from the appointment process and handing over the responsibility to the Office of Community Involvement to handle the applications and the selection process and the evaluation process. And we can talk more about that when we bring it to you, sort of what the perimeters will be of applicants. So those are the ones that we had time to get through. And then we have some remaining agenda items that Jude will update you on.
Yeah, so our next steps, we are probably going to, not probably, we are going to finish looking at some of the topics for the charter review that came up either through OCI or just from the committee itself. And then y'all heard a little bit about the auditors, you know, suggestions. So that's a bigger topic. We are also going to get into the nitty gritty of that one. And the next following meetings are us just essentially talking about these topics and seeing whether or not we want to bring it up to the full committee. So next full committee meeting, I think we'll have a couple of proposals for y'all.
Thanks, Maya and Jude. Let's go with safety and justice.
Hey, everybody. Nina is sick today, so she cannot be here. But I think the core things to update you all on is, you know, this evictions, sheriff's out of evictions amendment that I've been talking about is not possible through the county charter, and that's because of the state constitution. State constitution only mentions the sheriff, the word sheriff 6 times. It's only like 3 things that it says outwardly about the sheriff. And one of those is that they must be the ministerial or shall be the ministerial officer of the court. And so because evictions are court orders, the sheriffs still have to be in state law a part of the evictions process. I have talked to Catherine about this a little bit deeper. She's presented to our Safety and Justice Subcommittee about this. And then we had another meeting just going into more depth about something called preemption, which I won't pretend to be an expert on. But the kind of core question that I was coming from was, places like where we see state law trumping what you might see at the level of the feds. So examples are, marijuana, for example, or the threat to abortions, where some states will maintain that right, but the feds are doing things to dismantle the rights. And so the understanding that I left with is that we couldn't do something like that with evictions. That is still not something that counties have the authority to do, but that there is the ability for preemption to happen in cases of a niche thing that would only be specific to the governance of Multnomah County. So Catherine could better explain that. But also what Catherine said is there really aren't any examples right now that she could point to that would show that. But I think she did make like what if around the number of county commissioners or something that could be so specific to the county that we could make our own governance around that. But hopefully that wasn't too drawn out. But it was an unfortunate learning, especially near the end of this process, where I know a lot of it was a excitement amongst some people in the full committee and especially in the subcommittee to see something like this through. Some of the light that did come from this conversation, I was asking about the what we're seeing with Portland Street response. I'm sure you all are familiar, but for the record, because these are public meetings, people who might not be, is expanding out our 911 system where you aren't necessarily putting the cops first to all 911 calls for people with mental health issues and a lot of the people who are homeless on our streets. Saying, could we have something like this, be our response at the county level instead of the sheriffs and people who are more dedicated in a mental health trauma informed way than cops who might have got behavioral health training. And so what Catherine was saying is that ultimately we may be able to, or if I'm translating wrong, Catherine, please, do your thing. But that something like this may be possible, but the gist of it is that state law would need to change, and that could be done through a constitutional change, or it could be done through a statutory change through the legislation. So one requires, a number of signatures that I can't remember the number to change state law that would add some more to that preamble that says, this is a type of response that also could come before a sheriff. So there was still kind of a belief that the sheriff still has to be a part of the process, but that's changing state law is ultimately the pathway, and not the county. And so the example that Catherine pointed to was what we're seeing. If y'all aren't familiar, there's lobby right now for eviction representation for all. So in the same vein of what we're hearing with public defenders, unfortunately, when people are evicted, you don't see them, you actually aren't afforded a public defendant. So you're kind of in there by yourself while, many times the landlord might be able to afford, representation or may have a better handle on the law. So it's not on the winning end in a lot of ways for tenants. And so at the county level right now, there's a campaign to get signatures that would make it a part of our system to make sure that people have that in evictions court as well. So that is the same kind of process that would be needed at the state level for such a ballot initiative. So there's that, and what we've left with is that we are now trying to pursue having the county commissioners, the board of commissioners, visit the jails um, at least 4 times. Um, and we found a county ordinance. And Salma, I'll have you highlight some more about the public defenders too, because I left that out and I don't want to leave that out. But anyways, there's a county ordinance that makes them have to visit 1 time. The chair said she felt like that was basically sufficient. I do not agree. The you know People in jail are some of the least interface with people in society. It's literally a way to keep people away from the general population. I think we need to make sure that the county, the people who are setting the governance of this county, make more interface with not just the people in the jails, but the facilities themselves. This is not something that I'm the most excited about. I think it's at the low end of some of the things that we were hoping that we could see change, but this is literally, I feel, the bare minimum of what we could do to change anything having to do with safety and justice regarding this county that has deep deficits around how they treat Black folks, how they treat brown folks, how they treat a ton of people who are in this county. So I have to give that note as well. This is the bare minimum that's coming from the county, or from the Safety and Justice Committee, and I think a number of people wanted to see more, including exploring this public defender's idea. So, Salma, I'll let you kind of take that on.
Actually, a time check. I want to be sure that we hear from the other subcommittees as well. And we do have to have public comment. Salma, maybe if you can very, very, very briefly give an update, or we can follow up maybe with committee members in the chat as well.
I can try to summarize this as quick as I can, because it was discussed a bit earlier through the question I asked District Attorney Mike Schmidt. So essentially, we kind of were pursuing the path of like public defender's office or services, and seeing the possibility if we can have, instead of the current system where I guess the state contracts, for like contract with the possibility of like electing public defenders, because the current system has not been working, and it's been publicized just how difficult the situation, like how strained the situation has become. I just want to point out a few quick facts just to kind of put this in perspective, because currently we've kind of reached a dead end where it's like it was stated earlier, it's kind of more of a state, it's an issue that the state has to go deal with at its core instead of the county. So way back in like, I think it was January or so, there was like a report, the Oregon Project done, and one of the things it revealed was that the amount of defenders needed are down 70%, and there is this huge problem. A lot of cases are being dismissed, and many people whose indigent defendants who need these services and can't afford to have a representative aren't receiving those services, and many people have been left in jails. Oh, sorry. I'll wrap it up. I just wanted to just point out how severe this issue has become, and also there's a case-by-case pay, which would encourage, I guess, volume for defenders, and many, like I said, cases are dismissed. So there's just a huge problem with the system, I guess, currently, and there's a lot of deliberating going on, not only with the county, but like the state as well. So it's a ongoing issue that's we're still searching for a solution. And the only possibility that I guess we talked with Catherine, and she pointed out possibly reaching out to the 2 public defender system, just pointing out Metropolitan Inc. or something. I can put real quick. the Defenders, Multnomah Defenders Inc. and Multnomah County Public Defenders. There's two main.
Alma, we really do have to move on.
Yeah.
So, Alma, I'm going to suggest that.
I hope they cleared enough up. I know I was really confused. I was trying to understand this process. Secondly, it's asking any improvements to these people who are very well entrenched in the system. Sorry.
Thanks, Alma. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's okay, Salon. You can say more in the chat too, so everyone can see that. Let's go to, I'm sorry, everyone, we got 8 minutes left, so let's go to equitable representation, switch over to community engagement, and then we'll get to that public comment soon.
Yeah, I'll just go through this really quickly so we can get to the public comment. So at the last subcommittee meeting, we voted to move forward a recommendation to extend voting rights to non-citizens. The recommendation as written is to, you know, everybody in the county, but there was some debate about should that apply only to people who are you know, considered lawful, which would be like, for example, visa holders and things like that. So that you'll be seeing, I think, at the next full meeting, that recommendation. Other things we discussed include the voting methods, so like ranked choice voting or star voting. Depending on where we fall on that, then we could also discuss whether we would recommend eliminating primaries. Another thing that came up was some public testimony recommended electing all of the commissioners in the same year. And the reason for that would be to allow the District 2 commissioner to run for chair, which currently they can't do because of the way the cycle falls. There also may be other ways that we can make that fair without changing the timing of the elections. So we're investigating that right now. We discussed allowing candidates to indicate a party preference. We're probably not going to move forward with that just because of the time that we have to work on things. And the big thing that we're still discussing is whether to increase the number of commissioners and whether to have multi-member districts if we do increase the number of commissioners. And then following on that, if we did have multi-member districts, would we recommend proportional representation? So we've kind of bitten off a lot, and we've had a lot of good discussions and good presentations. I think we only have one meeting left, so we're going to have to do a lot of work between now and then. But yeah, that's my quick summary.
Thanks, Annie. I know we're probably going to go over time. So for that person doing public comment, thank you for hanging on a bit longer. And thank you to the rest of the committee members and public hanging on too. So let's go to community engagement.
Kali noted in the chat, but I don't think that we have a community engagement update. That subcommittee was not able to meet, but Kali might have a next steps piece that maybe we can get to. Nope, never mind. We're not going to have a next steps piece.
Sounds good. On the side of co-chair, we got one simple update. We have, I'm not sure y'all noticed that committee member Cabbage has stepped down as of this month. So we all want to just say we really appreciate their service. And as of now, we're now a committee of 15, so quorum is now 8. So let's pass it on to Mark. Let's start public comment.
All right, thank you so much. We are always happy to hear in this group from members of the community on your thoughts about charter review. Do want to remind folks that they can submit written testimony to this committee and it will be put in front of us. Also, and we have not received any written comment for this week. We will be holding times in our meetings for verbal public comment, and we have one candidate for verbal public comment, and I'm going to turn it over to Allison to take the next step. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Tom, I know that you're out there and you signed up for comments, so I'm going to promote you as a panelist, and that'll give you the opportunity to turn your camera on. Just accept that notice when it comes up, and you can come on in. And for other folks, I'm going to lower all hands that are out there. Auditor, I see your hand up. I think that was in response to something earlier. But if there's anybody else who would like to give public comment, who's here as a public observer, if you raise your hand, I'll see that you're here wanting to give comment. So Tom, welcome. You have 3 minutes and 30 seconds for testimony, and over to you.
Hello, my name is Tom Bessie. I'm speaking today to draw attention to my previous written comments suggesting a measure to establish an elected public defender. I have experience with that, having lived in San Francisco. Public defense is the most broken government function in Multnomah. Everyone knows this. Just 6 days ago, Multnomah's public defense crisis made national headlines in an Associated Press article. Indigents without a lawyer are being held for months on end. Probable criminals are also being released in the community for lack of representation. The legislature, the attorney general, the governor, the commissioners, and the district attorney have taken no action to address a crisis of their own making. They won't fix it. They have no incentive to care. That is why this committee exists. Proposing a measure would force a democratic conversation. A structural problem requires a structural solution. The duties of the elected official would be to provide oversight of the quality and integrity of indigent defense against cases charged by the district attorney. It doesn't have to be a large office. The official would coordinate information sharing among the current balkanized system of nonprofits, such as patterns of prosecutorial misconduct, bad cops, and advocate for improvements to the criminal justice process, such as the implementation of holistic defense, something you ought to research. The county's elected officer would work in tandem and in supplementation to the current state system under the limited home rule for charter counties under the state constitution. Public defenders are elected in San Francisco. You might want to consider interviewing the current one there. Florida, Tennessee, and Nebraska. In 2020, the Columbia Human Rights Law Review concluded, electing the office chief has allowed for some of the best public defender offices in the country to thrive. There is also strong evidence to suggest that this has positive effects beyond the immediate needs of indigent clients. Elections have heightened the independence and stature of the public defenders across the diverse set of places where these elections exist. Doing so can attract innovative public defense practices, heighten the stature and respect for indigent defense, and serve as a vehicle to rally political forces striving to improve the criminal justice system. And I should add here, holistic defense involves coordinating social work with the process of defense to address the underlying problems of crime. If our elected officials take no action or no proposal is submitted to the voters, unwanted change might come about through an undemocratic process. The ACLU is threatening to sue the state and the county over the deplorable conditions of Multnomah public defense. The time to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Tom, I'm going to put you back into the audience. Thank you for joining us. Okay, I'll maybe do that in a second. I don't see any other hands out there, but this is a final call. If there's anybody out in the audience who would like to give comment. Okay, I don't see those hands. So I will turn it over to our tri-chairs to close us out.
Yeah, so I know we went through a lot of information and I really appreciate you all hanging on there. So in terms of action items, of course, we're waiting for all the subcommittees to bring their recommendations to the full committee next month, and we'll be talking as a full committee about which ones we want to bring on to voters. So that will be our next action item. And then I'll pass it on to Callie to talk about the meeting calendar for June and July.
All right, so you all are very tricky to schedule around, but I have found 2 meeting dates that we should have over a quorum who are able to attend. So the 2 meeting dates that I'm looking at for you are Tuesday, June 28th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. and Tuesday, July 5th, 6:15 to 7:45, which I know is a really odd start time for us, but that was the time. So I'll be sending out calendar invites soon, and so that you can mark that off on your calendar. And I will just ask, since like I mentioned, I'm expecting 10 or 11 people have already confirmed that they can make those meeting times. But as we kind of saw tonight, like sickness happens, last minute stuff happens, people aren't able to attend, and that's totally understandable. If you have to take care of yourselves first, that's important. But I'll just, ask that if your plans do change and you are no longer able to attend the meetings, or if they change and you are able to attend those meetings, please let me know so I can keep track of whether or not we'll have quorum, especially as we get to the end of our schedule. If we lose any of those meetings, it's going to shift our plans kind of dramatically in terms of like what you can actually accomplish as a group in terms of making decisions and reviewing feedback from the county attorney's office and voting on your final report. So I'll also ask for your regular meetings, that more than ever in the past, you'd be really transparent with me about which meetings you're able to attend and which ones you aren't, so that if we have to make any scheduling changes, we can adjust as soon as we can. And of course, I will say, I know things come up day of, especially if you get sick. So you don't have to feel bad if there's a last minute emergency or anything like that. Just please let me know as soon as you can.
Okay. So with that in mind, yes, we'll be meeting in June, whole new month, whole new opportunities. So there we go. But I want to thank you all, first of all, for being here, hanging on this meeting, because I know we got a lot of information thrown at you all. And just enjoy the rest of the day until we meet you all then. So thank you and have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye. See y'all.
We're still recording. I have a quick question outside of